Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
It is Monday, August 26th. New book.
We like new books.
New book from Concordia Publishing House on martyrs.
Mm-hmm. If you've been listening to Cross Defense for the last multiple months, you've gotten a lot of teasers for this book.
That's absolutely true, because the author is none other than the Reverend Bryan Wolfmueller, pastor at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Austin, Texas, and pastor of A Martyr's Faith in a Faithless World. Pastor Wolfmueller, thanks for joining us on the Coffee Hour this morning.
Thank you guys for having me.
Always fun to get to chat with Pastor Wolfmueller at St. Paul Lutheran Church and Jesus Deaf Lutheran Church in Austin as well. How are things going in Texas now?
Fine. Carrie found a picture. Is a cartoon. It was a picture of God sitting back on a kind of a lounge table, and someone said, "Hey, God, what are you cooking?" And God says, "Texas." Why? So anyway, we've been adjusting to that. I've been getting a tan without even taking my shirt off. It's been just kind of extra roasty down here. I think we had 10 days or something over 100, but it cooled off. It was down to like 98 the other day. In fact, it rained, and I thought, "Oh, rain. That's nice. It cooled it off." And I went outside, and it was like going into a hot shower.
Yes, yeah. It's nice and soggy here in St. Louis. It's not hot in St. Louis right now. It's just very wet. But enough about the weather. You wrote a new book, Martyrs, A Martyr's Faith in a Faithless World. Why a book on martyrs, Pastor Wolfmueller?
Well, there's a lot that kind of went into that. I was thinking about. I figured he'd ask a question like that. So I
have more questions on martyrs.
There's like 7 or 8 things that kind of piled into this book project. One was I read a book. I was asked to mentor a confirmand a couple of years back at a sister congregation, and they had a book that they were reading, and it was like an adult faith or something, and I read and it was just horrible. It was a book for young Christians, but it was all law, no gospel. It's like a moralistic handbook. It was really terrible. And I thought then, this was 5 years ago, I can do better than that. And especially as my own kids were getting older, and Hannah was getting ready to go off to college. Now she's gone for 1 week under the belt away at college. I thought I want to put something in her hands that would equip her for the assault that comes to the faith. And so I sort of was thinking of like a handbook for post-confirmation sort of things. And that got me thinking, especially about this vow that we make in confirmation. Would you renounce everything? Even would you give up your own life, but rather than give up the faith? And we say, yes, we make the martyr's vow at confirmation time. But how, we haven't had to really worry about that lately, at least in the United States, giving up our lives. But this is what a mature faith is doing. It's ready to lay down. We want to be ready to lay down our lives rather than fall away. So to see that our faith is always assaulted, and to know how the Lord protects us and keeps us in the faith, that was kind of the idea. And it worked out that the sort of organizing structure for the book, which came late. That's supposed to be at the beginning, by the way. Don't tell my editors that it kind of came along late. But I was like, how am I going to fit all this stuff together? Because I had all these like little chapters and stuff. Well, what occurred to me, or what you just kind of shaped up, was why don't we organize this around the parable of the sower? It's really Jesus is asking that question: how do some stay in the faith and some leave the faith? They lose their faith. And Jesus says some seed is snatched up by the birds, and some seed is burnt by the sun, and some seed is choked by the weeds, and some seed grows. And so I took those major assaults on the faith, the devil, the world and suffering, the flesh and pleasure, and sort of outlined how these attack our faith, and what the Lord would have us do, and more importantly, what the Lord does to protect us. And then put in the stories of the martyrs as kind of examples of the heroes that have gone before us and kept the faith even to the end.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I think it's really cool that you wanted your daughter to have something like this, especially going off to college and experiencing that whole different assortment of societal things and cultural things that you may not get when you're, at home, going to grade school and high school. It's a very different world when you get off on your own going to college. What can we learn from martyrs? You touched on them a little bit, and I've heard you talk about this before. But what can we learn from martyrs?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot there. One is, so as maybe a way to ease into it, and then you push me in whatever direction you want me to go. But Carrie, as I study the martyrs, which I love to study the martyrs and think about these stories. Number one, because they're encouraging, and number two, because just as a teacher, as a preacher, as a radio host, when you start telling stories about the martyrs, you have everybody's attention. I mean, it's kind of a cheating way to do it. I mean, you start telling about like Romanus getting his beard torn out, or Agatha, 13 years old, dancing to the stake, and I mean, you have people's attention, which is great. But Carrie always says, Brian, why do you have to tell all these stories at dinner time? You're just grossing us out. But so that's maybe a way of reminder. I wrote a sort of a follow-up kind of booklet companion to this book that I'm working through now. It's Luther's Theology of the Martyrs, and I had a couple of people edit it for me, and they said, this is really tough. It's really difficult. And I realized that so I'm thinking about the martyrs all the time, but that is weird. Most people are not. Most people are not thinking about the martyrs. Most people are not thinking about death. Most people are not thinking about laying down their life for the name of Jesus. It seems so far away to most people. But the martyrs, Luther calls the martyrs this is great. He calls them the true martyrdom is the true pattern of the Christian life. In other words, martyrdom is what the Christian expects. And when we're not martyred, when the Lord lets us live a full life and avoid persecution and avoid being put to death, that is something unique and something unexpected and special. Now, how about that? The martyrs are the normal pattern of the Christian life. And I think that's true in the Scriptures. When Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me, or he gives a promise like those who kill you will think that they're doing a service to God, or in the books, in the letter that he writes, for example, in Revelation, where he says, the one who endures to the end will be saved. It's almost the expectation of martyrdom. And so I think in some ways we need to reshape what the Christian life looks like in our mind. It certainly is not this your best life now business. The Christian life looks a lot more like martyrdom. And if the Lord gives us relief from that for a time, we give thanks for it. But we want to be ready. We want to be ready for that so that we think that, like Peter says when he writes his epistle, he says, don't think that the suffering that's coming upon you is something strange. The suffering that we suffer for the sake of Christ is not a strange thing. It's a normal thing. And when we shape our expectations to be ready for the suffering, it gives us freedom, it gives us boldness, it gives us life, it gives us joy and confidence. It makes us impervious to the devil's attack, because what is he going to do? The devil comes along to threaten us with the fear of death. That's the devil's enslavement. Hey, you ought to be afraid to die. And when we say, hey, devil, I'm not afraid to die, that's why I'm baptized. I'm baptized into the death of Jesus. I've already died with Christ. To live is Christ, to die is gain. Well, I'm ready to see the face of Jesus. Jesus, my life is hidden with God in Christ. I've put on Christ. I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. All these scriptures are there. Now, what can the devil do? I mean, you take away the threat of death. So, it's great. Amen. In fact, I think Carrie says all this talk about martyrs is setting you up to be martyred, which maybe I'll be martyred. I don't know. But I think the best way to not be martyred is to be ready for it. Because if you're like, hey, all right, I'll be martyred, and the devil's like, that'll be no fun.
All right, we have about a minute and a half. This is like behind the scenes exclusive. Take us into the study of Pastor Wolfmueller while you're writing and working on this, doing this research. First of all, in one of the chapters, you talk back to the book, like don't read passively, but read engaged. Do you yell at things? Do you yell at books when you're reading them? I'm just curious.
Please say yes.
A couple of times I've thrown books against the wall.
Yeah, I can see that.
Oh, man.
Right, so what?
Really bad ones.
What sources? All right, just about a minute left. What sources did you go to research these martyrs and compile their stories in this book?
Yeah, there's a couple. The most famous is Fox's Book of Martyrs, which is really nice. I pulled up some of the church fathers also, so like the martyrdom of Agatha and also of Polycarp is given to us by Jerome, and I really lean on Henry of Zutphen. And that martyrdom story is told by Luther himself. So I'm kind of digging all over for these things and pulling them up here and there.
In 30 seconds or less.
I answered the question too fast.
No. That's spot on, man. Okay, well, I was going to ask another question, but that's going to take another half an hour. So,
It's true.
we can find the book. Where can we find Martyr's Faith in a Faithless World?
CPH has it now. I think it ships tomorrow. Amazon has it available, and people have been sending me notes about when it's going to arrive from Amazon. Anywhere that buys books, you should be able to find it. Martyr's Faith for a Faithless World.
Martyr's Faith in a Faithless World. Pastor Bryan Wolfmueller, St. Paul Lutheran Church, Austin, Texas, Jesus Deaf Lutheran Church. Thanks so much for joining us in the Coffee Hour this morning.
Hey, my pleasure.
That does it for the Coffee Hour today. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.